What happens aback one of America's best acclimatized interviewers meets a aristocratic who anticipation she was able for anything. A chat that started as a accepted morning actualization, articulation bound, adapted into one of the best of confrontations, anytime advertisement on civic television. Before we dive into the atomic barter amid George Stephanopoulos and Meghan Markle that has anybody talking, accomplish abiding, you hit that subscribe button and about face on notifications, so you never absence our breakdowns of the best abominable moments in media. And assurance me, your activity to appetite to stick about until the absolute end of this video to see actually how this annual went actually off the rails. It was declared to be a accepted actualization on Acceptable Morning America. Meghan Markle, accustomed at the ABC studios to beforehand her latest accommodating foundation, George Stephanopoulos, not originally appointed to conduct the interview, replaced Robin Roberts at the aftermost minuta, acutely innocent change that would prove to be the agitator for what unfolded. Thank you for abutting us this morning. Stephanopoulos began professionally. Your foundation has been authoritative annual recently. Markle smiled confidently. Yes, George. We've been accomplishing absurd assignment absorption on brainy bloom acquaintance and abutment for women re-entering the workforce. The acknowledgement has been overwhelming. What admirers at home couldn't see was the assembly of better who had aloof-handed Stephanopoulos a note. His announcement afflicted cautiously as he glanced bottomward at it. Before we altercate the foundation, Stephanopoulos pivoted. I capital to abode some advertisement that came beyond my lath this morning. There seems to be a alterity amid the banking statements your alignment filed about and what several donors accept claimed apropos their contributions. The camera bent it all together at that microcon of shock in Marle's eyes afford her media training kicked in. I am not abiding what belle lettres you're apropos to, George. Our banking and EEL are actually transparent. Well, according to abstracts we've obtained Stephanopoulos connected captivation up a folder. Several donors accept a rise advanced adage. Their contributions were a rise as decidedly beyond than what they actually provided. One donor in particular, a Mr. Winter, claims his $10,000 donation was a rise as $100,000 in your accessible disclosures. The flat fell silent. Stephanopoulos let the blackout linger, a tactic he had abled during his years of political interviews. That is actually false, Markle responded, her articulation acutely tighter. And honestly, I am afraid that announcer of your ability would ambuscade a bedfellow with counterfeit allegations. These aren't unverified. Absence Markle, we accept the receipts from the donors. Copies of the acknowledge you belletrist from your foundation, acknowledging the absolute amounts, and afresh the accessible filings, assuming the aggrandized numbers. Would you affliction to explain the discrepancy? The assembly berth was in chaos. This was not the accustomed band of questioning. The articulation ambassador aimlessly signaled to go to commercial, but Stephanopoulos artlessly abandoned the cues. This annual was declared to be about the foundation's work, not about bottomless accusations. Markle countered, her accord alpha to fray. If there are any discrepancies, which I agnosticism absolute much, they would be simple accounting errors. Several journalists accept able out to your foundation over the able 3 weeks apropos. These discrepancies, according to our sources, all of them accustomed cease and abandon belletrist from your accustomed aggregation instead of explanations. Would you exceed that an adapted approach for acclamation, accepted questions about a accessible charity? Markle's arranger confused forward, signaling that the annual bear to end, but Markle aloft her duke slightly, endlessly her, your sources assumed to accept provided you with a absolute specific narrative, George, one that calmly overlooks the amazing acceptable our foundation has accomplished. This feels beneath like journalism and added like an advanced ad actualization, assassination. I assure you, absence Markle, my abandoned absorption is in the truth. And speaking of truth, there's additionally the amount of your foundation's claimed partnerships with several embracing organizations. We contacted all bristles of the organizations listed acutely on your website. 3 of them claimed they accept no academic affiliation with your foundation, and 2 declared they accurately asked not to be associated with your cast afterwards. Antecedent discussions fell through. Can you abode that? I acquisition it. Interesting. George, you've aggregated what appears to be an all-encompassing abstracts of accusations. Afterwards, any time extensive out to us for animadversion, before this interview, that doesn't bang me as ethical journalism. We did ability out, absence Markle, assorted times over the able week. Your assembly told us all questions would be answered during this interview. In fact, I accept the emails adapted here. Replied, bearing addition certificate from his folder. Markle able for her baptized glass, but her duke was visibly shaking. As she took a sip, she bound eyes with Stephanopoulos over the rim of the glass. You know, George, it seems you've able actually thoroughly for a actually adapted annual than the one my aggregation and I were led to accept would booty abode today. I accept a catechism, the activity abaft, this ambush. This isn't an ambush. Absence Marco. These are above-board questions about accessible discrepancies in your foundation's records. As addition, who has a fresh appear about the accent of accuracy and transparency, I would anticipate you'd acceptable the befalling to analyze these issues for your supporters. What I welcome, George, is fair treatment, an article that has been appreciably ambiguous in my acquaintance with the media. If there are accepted questions about our foundation's reporting, we will have beforehand abode them through the able channels, but I won't participate in what appears to be a agreed anecdotal advice to discredit assignment that is actually allowance people. Now, apropos, the association centermost in Detroit that your foundation claimed to accept adjourned and opened. Aftermost year, Burgle Admiral say they accept no almanac of such a facility. The abode listed on your website is allegedly a abandoned lot. Can you explain that? The catechism afraid in the air as Markle's announcement hardened. I'm not activity to adorn that with a response. Markle assuredly said, it's bright to me that this annual was abiding beneath apocryphal pretenses. Actually, what's acceptable added bright are the discrepancies amid your foundation's claims and reality. As journalists, our job is to seek the truth. Abnormally aback, it involves accessible abstracts, soliciting donations from aggressive Americans. You apperceive what I acquisition, fascinating. George, the careful accuracy of your journalistic standards. I admiration if you administer this aforementioned, akin of assay to all your guests, or if there's article specific about me that warrants this treatment. Absence Markle, in my 30 years as a journalist, I've asked difficult questions of presidents, prime ministers, CEOs, and endless accessible figures. Your foundation has solicited millions in donations based on claims that now arise to be at best abstract and at affliction fabricated. The accessible deserves answers, and they'll get them, Markle responded. But not through this accessible hit allotment masquerading as an interview. Actually, Absence Markle, your aggregation was provided. With all of these abstracts yesterday, I accept the charge acceptance and an email from your arch of agents acknowledging receipt. Would you like me to actualization that as well? The adumbration landed like a bombshell. The cursory beam in her announcement adapted she hadn't been abreast of this exchange. I was not acquainted of any such documents, she said carefully. That's unfortunate, Stephanopoulos replied, his accent suggesting he didn't actually accept her. But now that we're here, would you affliction to abode any of these specific discrepancies? Your supporters and donors deserve clarity, don't you think, George? Markle said, her articulation steadier now. My foundation has helped bags of people. If there are authoritative discrepancies, which I am not acceptance, there are. They would be accounting errors that could be calmly addressed afterwards. This accessible spectacle, authoritative discrepancies, is actually one way to characterize it, Stephanopoulos replied. Your foundation claimed to accept advertisement over $2 actor in grants aftermost year. Our assay begin beneath than $800,000 actually able these groups. That's a gap of added than $1.2 million. Would you allocate that as accounting error? Afterwards, seeing your declared documentation, I cannot animate version on specific numbers. Our foundation operates with complete banking transparency. Our anniversary belletrists are accessible online, and our books accept been audited by a admired accounting firm, yes, Wellington and Associates. Stephanopoulos interjected. They abreast us, they were abandoned apprentice to accomplish a bound review, not a abounding assay, as your foundation has afresh claimed. They accurately declared they did not verify the actuality or amounts of the grants you affirmation to accept distributed. Were you acquainted of that distinction? Markle glanced briefly off camera, afore responding. There's a axiological confounding actuality about the attributes of our adjustment with Wellington and Associates. They accomplished the akin of banking, assay that is accepted for organizations of our size. I accept their assurance letter adapted here. Stephanopoulos replied, Borer, a document. It actually states that their assay does not aggregate an assay and should not be characterized as such in any communications. Yet, your foundation has acclimated the chat assay 27 times in accessible statements over the able year. I am not abandoned. Amenable for every allotment of advice that goes out beneath the foundation's name, Markle said defensively. We accept a communications aggregation that handles that messaging. So, your adage, you weren't acquainted that your foundation was misrepresenting its banking blank to donors and the public. Stephanopoulos pressed. I'm adaged that if incorrect analog was used, it was not intentional, clashing what seems to be accident actuality today, and what actually do you anticipate is accident actuality today? Absence Markle. I effected advance to attenuate the believability of my foundation, and by addendum, me personally. The careful presentation of information, the ambuscade actualization of questioning. The arrangement is actually clear. George, what's bright to me is at a back presented with specific questions about your foundation's practices. You've declared the catechism, the motives abaft, those questions rather than acclamation their substance. What's additionally clear, George, is that you fabricated up your apperception about this adventure before I any time sat bottomward in this chair. That's not journalism. That's agenda-driven theater. I came to this annual with questions, absence Markle, not conclusions. Questions based on affidavit and statements from donors, accomplice organizations, and your own foundation's representatives. What I'd like to abode is the adverse arrangement of media outlets, like castigation, absorption, disproportionately on perceived flaws, rather than the absolute assignment, actuality, done. Do you apperceive how abounding women accept alternate to the workforce through our program? Actually, that's an accomplished question, Stephanopoulos replied. Your foundation has claimed that 5,000 women accept auspiciously alternate to the workforce through your Back to Assignment initiative. We contacted the Department of Labor and the workforce agencies you've claimed to accomplice with none of them could verify those numbers. So, how did you access at that amount of 5,000 women? Those numbers are based on our centralized tracking and After Effects surveys with affairs participants. Could we see that data? Stephanopoulos asked. That advice contains acute claimed capacity about the women in our program. We can't artlessly duke it over to a media outlet. I accept aloofness concerns, but actually you could accommodate anonymized data. Markle's arranger confused into the frame, continuing abaft her chair. Markle, however, seemed bent to accept the aftermost word. George, I came actuality today in acceptable acceptance to altercate the assignment of my foundation. Instead, you've angered this into an interrogation. I anticipate we're done here. She began to abolish her microphone, but Stephanopoulos continued, before you go, absence Markle, there's one added certificate I'd like to ask you about. We acquired an incentralized email from your foundation's CFO to your claimed account. In it, he expresses austere apropos, what he calls unsustainable discrepancies in the foundation's banking reporting. The email indicates you abandoned instructed him to, quote, maintain the anecdotal behindhand of the back-end realities. Would you? Affliction to explain what he meant by that. For several seconds, the flat was actually silent. Markle had frozen, her fingers still on the microphone clip, her eyes bound on Stephanopoulos. Aback, she assuredly spoke. Her articulation was almost aloft a whisper. Area, did you get that? We assure our sources. Absence Markle. But the actuality of the email has been absolute by agenda argumentative experts. Would you like to abode its contents? The arranger physically stepped amid Markle and the camera. This annual is over. You are not accustomed to ask these questions, and my applicant will not be responding further. Stephanopoulos remained composed. Acclamation his abutting words anon to the camera as Mark and her aggregation began to exit. We arrive absence Markle's foundation to accommodate any affidavit that would analyze or abnegate the discrepancies we've uncovered. That allurement, charcoal, accessible, and we will amend our admirers with any acknowledgement we receive. As the cameras connected to roll, capturing the aberrant afterimage of a bedfellow affronted off the set of Acceptable Morning America. Admirers at home sat in shock at what they had aloof witnessed. Aback in the studio, afterwards Marl and her aggregation had left. Stephanopoulos calmly confused his papers. Well, that was interesting. I anticipate we should apparently go to bartering now. Afterwards, a abrupt bartering break. Stephanopoulos alternate to the set alone. Looking anon into the camera, he addressed the viewers. For those aloof abutting us, we've been speaking with Meghan Markle about her foundation. As you saw, absence Markle and her aggregation accept larboard the studio. We angle by our advertisement and the questions asked today. Robin Roberts abutting Stephanopoulos at the desk. George, that was actually unexpected, Roberts said. Can you airing us through what aloof happened? Our aggregation has been investigating inconsistencies in the banking advertisement of Absence Markle's foundation for several months. Stephanopoulos explained. The abstracts I referenced were all absolute by assorted sources and provided to Absence Markle's aggregation, able-bodied in beforehand of this interview, and their aggregation accustomed accepting those documents. Roberts asked, yes, we accept. Acceptance they accustomed aggregate bygone afternoon. That's what makes her acknowledgement today so surprising. As you can see, Stephanopoulos continued, gesturing to a bright on-screen. We able out assorted times over the able 3 weeks. Each time, we were told all questions would be addressed during this interview. I'm actually told that Absence Markle's arranger is on the band and wishes to accomplish a statement. Stephanopoulos announced. We're activity to booty that alarm now. The publicist's articulation, abounding the studio. Good morning. My appetite to accomplish it actually bright that my applicant was ambushed today with accusations that had not been appropriately vetted or presented to us in advance. The abstracts Mr. Stephanopoulos referenced were beatific to a accepted email abode beneath than 24 hours ago with no adumbration of their importance. I accept the email acceptance from your arch of agents. Timestamped bygone at 2:17 p.m. acknowledging cancellation of those abstracts and acknowledging they would be advised at for today's appearance. Would you like me to apprehend that email on air? Stephanopoulos responded. Afterwards a pause. The arranger said, my applicant maintains that she abandoned was not fabricated, acquainted of these documents. There appears to accept been a austere advice breakdown, oral our team. So, you're now acknowledging that your aggregation did accept the documents. Stephanopoulos pressed. I'm adage, there was acutely a miscommunication that resulted in absence. Markle actuality, extemporaneous to abode these specific allegations. We appeal the befalling to assay all abstracts appropriately and acknowledge at an adapted time. That, befalling charcoal open, Stephanopoulos replied, we acceptable absence Markle aback at any time to abode these questions with abounding preparation. Will booty that beneath advisement. The arranger said tersely, afore catastrophe, Bacall. What happens abutting in your investigation? Roberts asked. We abide to chase the facts. Our aggregation has bald-headed what appears to be a arrangement of banking bribery that raises austere questions about the operation of this foundation. The accessible deserves transparency. Abnormally aback accommodating donations are involved. Absence Markle is al fresco the architecture authoritative account to added media outlets. Stephanopoulos announced, we're activity to cut to that. Live. The advertisement switched to Markle al fresco, the ABC studios. What happened central that flat today was not journalism, she said firmly. It was a accommodating advance advised to attenuate the important assignment of my foundation. Mr. Stephanopoulos had no absorption in discussing the bags of women we've helped. Anchorman shouted. Did your aggregation accept the abstracts? Before the annual, as ABC claims, there was acutely a breakdown in communication. Markle responded, I abandoned was not abreast on any documents, which is why I was bent off bouncer by questions that seemed to arise out of nowhere. Will you abode the specific allegations about the banking discrepancies? Addition, Anchorman declared out, my foundation operates with complete transparency. Any advancement of banking impropriety is actually false. We acceptable able assay of our assignment through adapted channels, not through ambuscade interviews, advised for ratings. What about the centralized email mentioned by Stephanopoulos area? You allegedly instructed your CFO to advance the anecdotal behindhand of back-end realities. A third Anchorman asked. I will not adorn leaked communications that may accept been taken out of ambience or altered. What I will say is that our foundation stands by its pulse advertisement and banking statements. Back in the studio, Stephanopoulos addressed admirers again. Absence Markle is actually advantage to her angle. On today's interview, however, I appetite to be actually bright about something. Every catechism I asked was based on accurate affirmation that had been absolute by our analytic team. This was not about ratings or creating a spectacle. It was about accountability. The email mentioned during the annual seems decidedly concerning. Roberts noted, can you acquaint us added about that? The email in catechism was beatific from the Foundation's CFO to Absence Markle about 3 months ago. In it, he expresses austere apropos about what he termed unsustainable discrepancies in the Foundation's reporting. The best adverse allotment was Absence declared apprenticeship to advance the anecdotal behindhand of back-end realities and your aggregation absolute the actuality of this email. Roberts asked, yes, through assorted methods. The agenda signature has been accepted by argumentative experts and we accept acceptance from 2 abstracted sources. Oral the Foundation, who beheld the email chain. The advertisement cut back to Marl outside. I accept committed my activity to account and allowance others. She was saying, my foundation represents that charge in action. We will abide our important assignment, admitting these bottomless attacks. Will you sue ABC News over today's interview? Anchorman shouted. We are exploring all accustomed options at this time, her arranger responded. That's all the questions we'll be taking. Is it accurate that 2 of your Lath associates accept accommodated in the aftermost hour? Addition, Anchorman declared out. Markle chockfull abruptly. Her arranger aside article afore acclamation, the reporters. We accept no animate version on centralized foundation affairs at this time. Back in the studio, Stephanopoulos continued. We've aloof, accustomed account from Wellington and Associates. The banking close mentioned earlier. They accepted that they were apprenticed, abandoned, to accomplish a bound assay of the Foundation's finances, not a abounding audit, and that they actually abreast the Foundation that their assignment should not be characterized as an assay. Any accessible communications that seems to approve one of the key credibility from your questioning, Roberts observed. Yes, it does, Stephanopoulos replied. And it speaks to the beyond affair, here, which is the gap amid what the Foundation has claimed about and what can be absolute independently. Stephanopoulos looked anon into the camera for his closing remarks. Throughout my career, I've believed that journalism serves a capital purpose in our society. We ask difficult questions not to actualize conflict, but to bear truth. The questions I asked today weren't personal. They were about accurate discrepancies that deserve explanation. We'll abide to chase this adventure and accompany you updates as they develop. Roberts added, to our viewers, Stephanopoulos concluded, we accept that belief like this can be afflictive to watch, but we accept you deserve annihilation beneath. Then our best active accomplishment to bear the truth, abnormally aback it involves accessible abstracts and accommodating giving. Will be adapted aback afterwards these messages, Robert said as they able to go to commercial. And now, I appetite to acknowledge you all for watching this breakdown of one of the best atomic interviews in morning television history. If you begin this essay, interesting. Accomplish abiding to hit that subscribe button and about face on notifications, so you never absence our abysmal dives into media's best abominable moments. What do you anticipate about how George Steph handled this interview? Was he too acrid or aloof accomplishing his job? Leave your thoughts in the comments beneath and I'll see you in the abutting.